The twin suns of Viridian 6 cast long purple shadows across the research colony as Krall slipped past the perimeter sensors. The young Calarian knew he shouldn't venture beyond the safety boundaries, but curiosity pulled him toward the dense alien jungle. His blue-tinted skin shimmered with excitement, webbed fingers brushing against the strange plants that lined the path. Just a quick look, Krall whispered to himself. His large, dark eyes blinked twice as he adjusted to the dimmer light under the canopy of massive fern-like trees. Back at the colony, his father Jen would be busy with the other scientists, probably not noticing his absence for at least an hour. Krall loved the stories the humans told about their home planet. Earth seemed like such a dangerous place, with its many predators and harsh environments. The Calarians had evolved on a peaceful water world with few threats, which explained their lack of natural defenses. No claws, no tough skin, just intelligence and community as protection. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the colony, Jack Miller crouched low, examining fresh tracks in the soft soil. The human xenobiologist frowned, measuring the imprint with his hand. "These are new," he muttered, his brown eyes narrowing with concern, "and bigger than yesterday's." Jack stood up, brushing dirt from his knees. At 6 feet tall, he towered over most of the Calarians. His sturdy frame and quick reflexes were products of Earth's evolutionary pressures, something the gentle aquatic aliens found fascinating. "Miller, you need to see this," called Susan Wright from 20 yards away. The security officer's voice was calm but urgent. Jack jogged over to where Susan knelt beside what appeared to be a shredded sensor unit. Her short blonde hair was tied back practically, and her hand rested instinctively on her sidearm. "Something tore through the outer perimeter tech," she said. "Not weather damage. Look at these bite marks." Jack examined the mangled equipment. "Whatever did this has powerful jaws, and the intelligence to target our security system specifically." Susan stood, scanning the jungle edge with experienced eyes. "I've been saying we need better defenses since we arrived. The Calarians think I'm paranoid." "They don't understand predators," Jack replied. "Their homeworld didn't have any. They never evolved with that fear response." Back at the colony center, Jen was organizing research data when he noticed his son's absence. The tall, slender Calarian felt a wave of worry wash over him. Krall had been spending too much time with the humans lately, especially Jack Miller. The boy was developing a troubling fascination with Earth's violent history. "Have you seen Krall?" he asked Lisa Green, the human doctor who was studying Calarian physiology. Lisa shook her head. "Not since morning meal. Have you checked the communication hub? He likes watching the Earth broadcasts." Fear flickered across Jen's delicate features. "I already looked there. I'm sure he's fine," Lisa reassured him. "This colony is secure." Deep in the jungle, Krall had wandered farther than he'd intended. The young Calarian found himself in a small clearing, where strange rock formations jutted from the ground. They looked artificial, like ruins of some ancient structure. "Amazing," he whispered, touching the cool surface of a stone column covered in unfamiliar markings. Something about this place made his skin tingle with unease, but his curiosity won out over caution. A sudden rustle in the undergrowth made him freeze. Krall held his breath, remembering Susan's warnings about moving slowly if he ever felt threatened. The humans were always talking about predators and danger. Krall had thought they were just being overprotective. Now, as a shadow moved between the trees, he wasn't so sure. Back at the perimeter, Jack and Susan had reported their findings to the colony's leadership council. The small meeting room was filled with concerned faces, both human and Calarian. "We believe Viridian 6 was once home to apex predators," Jack explained, showing holographic images of the tracks and damaged equipment. The fossil records suggested they were extinct, but these signs indicate otherwise. Vex, an elderly Calarian with pale blue skin, spoke up. "Our ancient records speak of worlds with hunter creatures. We left such planets to the more resilient species." "You mean species that could fight back?" Susan said bluntly. Jen entered the room, interruption clear in his hurried movements. "My son is missing. Krall cannot be found within the colony." The room fell silent. Frank Dawson, the human technician, immediately pulled up the security feeds on his tablet. When was the last time anyone saw him? Mid-morning, Shen replied, his voice tight with fear. He has been fascinated by the jungle life. I worry he may have gone outside the perimeter. Jack finished grimly. We need to organize a search party now. Susan was already moving, speaking into her communicator to alert the security team. We'll need trackers, medkits, and weapons. Weapons? Zhen asked, his large eyes widening. Surely that's not. Trust me, Susan cut in. If what we found today is any indication, we're going to want them. Within minutes, the humans had assembled a search party. Jack studied a colony map, trying to predict which direction a curious Calarian boy might have gone. He's been asking me about the rock formations to the east, Jack realized. Said he saw them in some old survey photos. The ruins? Frank asked. That's nearly 2 miles into the jungle. Susan checked her gear efficiently. If he's been gone, for hours he could have made it that far. We need to move quickly. We have maybe 3 hours before sunset. As the search party prepared to leave, Zhen approached Jack. I'm coming with you, the Calarian scientist said firmly. Jack nodded. Stay close to me or Susan, no wandering off. In the jungle clearing, Kral had retreated behind one of the stone columns. Something large was moving around the perimeter of the open space, something that walked on 4 powerful limbs, with a low-slung body and what looked like armored skin. Chatu, creature sniffed the air, turning its elongated head toward Kral's hiding spot. The young Calarian trembled, his natural bioluminescence flickering involuntarily beneath his skin, a response to extreme stress that his species rarely experienced. The predator growled, a deep, rumbling sound that seemed to vibrate through the ground. It took a step closer to Kral's position. For the first time in his life, Kral felt true fear, the kind the humans described in their stories about Earth's dangerous wildlife. He understood now why they were always so cautious, why Susan insisted on weapons and perimeter checks. As the creature stalked closer, Kral pressed himself against the stone, wishing he had paid more attention to Jack's lessons about staying safe in unknown environments. The search party moved swiftly through the jungle, following a faint trail that might have been made by small Calarian feet. Jack led the way with Susan covering their flanks. Zhen stayed in the middle with Frank and 2 other human researchers. We're getting close to the ruins, Jack said quietly. Everyone stay alert. Susan suddenly raised her hand, signaling for the group to stop. Listen, she whispered. In the distance, they heard a high-pitched sound, the distress call of a young Calarian. Jen moved forward, but Jack held him back. That's also the sound that would attract a predator, he warned. We go in smart, or we don't help anyone. Susan checked her weapon. I'll take point. Jack, you and Jen approach from the east. Frank, circle around to the west with the others. As they moved into position, Jack gripped Jen's shoulder. We'll find him, he promised. And then we're going to have a serious talk about upgrading colony defenses. In the clearing, the predator had Kral cornered. The boy's back was pressed against ancient stone, his eyes wide with terror as the massive creature opened its jaws, revealing rows of serrated teeth. The predator's hot breath washed over Kral as it crept closer. Its 6 yellow eyes never blinked, focused entirely on the small Calarian boy. Kral's blue skin flickered with fear-induced bioluminescence, which seemed to make the creature even more interested. Stay still, Kral whispered to himself, remembering Jack's lessons about predators. Some hunt by movement, but his trembling body wouldn't obey. The beast was massive, easily 3 times Kral's size, with a low-slung body covered in thick armored scales. Its powerful jaws opened wider, revealing rows of teeth designed for tearing flesh. Kral pressed, himself harder against the stone column, but there was nowhere left to retreat. A loud crack suddenly echoed through the clearing as a warning shot from Susan's weapon hit a nearby tree. The predator hesitated, turning its elongated head toward the new sound. Jack burst through the jungle's edge, waving his arms and shouting, "Hey, over here!" The human's voice was deep and commanding, unlike anything the predator had heard before. It paused, confused by this new threat. Susan emerged from the opposite side of the clearing, her weapon raised. "Jack, get the boy," the predator growled, turning back toward Kral, unwilling to give up its prey. But as it lunged forward, Jack sprinted across the clearing, reaching Kral just before the creature's jaws could close around him. The human scooped up the Kalarian boy and rolled away with surprising speed. Jen called out his son's name as he rushed forward, but Frank held him back. "Let them handle this." The predator, now enraged, charged toward Jack and Kral. Susan fired another warning shot, but the creature barely slowed. "It's not backing down," Susan shouted. She aimed her weapon directly at the beast. Jack placed Kral behind him, facing the charging predator. In that moment, Kral saw something in the human's stance that he'd never observed in his own people. Not fear, but readiness. Jack wasn't running away. He was preparing to fight. Just as the predator leaped, Susan's shot hit the ground directly in front of it, sending dirt and stones flying into its eyes. The creature veered off course, crashing into one of the stone columns instead of Jack and Kral. "Move, back to the group," Jack ordered, pushing Kral toward his father while keeping his body between the boy and the stunned predator. The creature shook its massive head, recovering quickly. But now it faced a new situation. The humans and Kalarians had formed a tight group, with the humans on the outside facing outward. This confusing formation made the predator hesitate. "Back away slowly," Susan instructed the group. "Stay together. No sudden movements." The predator circled them, testing for weakness, growling deep in its throat. Then from the jungle came answering growls. "There's more than one," Frank whispered, his face pale. "Keep moving toward the colony," Susan replied calmly. "They're assessing if we're worth the trouble." As they retreated, Kral clung to his father, watching the humans with new eyes. "They're not running," he whispered. "Why aren't they running?" Jen had no answer. The concept of standing ground against a predator was foreign to Kalarian instinct. The group maintained their defensive formation all the way back to the colony perimeter. The predators followed at a distance, occasionally visible through the trees, dark shapes with gleaming eyes. Only when the colony's structures came into view did the creatures finally melt back into the jungle. Once inside the safety of the colony walls, medical staff rushed to check Kral for injuries. Lisa Green, the human doctor, examined him while speaking gently. "You're very brave," she told him, cleaning a small cut on his arm. "Most people would have panicked completely." "I was scared," Kral admitted, "but I remembered what Jack taught me about staying still." Nearby, Susan was already organizing additional security measures with Frank and other colony staff. Jack stood with Jen, explaining what they had seen. "It's a pack predator," Jack said, showing images he'd captured on his wrist device. "Highly intelligent, they were coordinating, testing our defenses." Vex, the elder Kalarian, approached slowly. His pale blue skin seemed almost translucent in the colony's artificial lighting. "The shadow hunters," he said in a quiet voice, just as the old stories warned. "You knew about these creatures?" Susan asked sharply. "Not new. Remembered legends," Vex clarified. "Our ancestors' records spoke of worlds where darkness moved with purpose, where danger had teeth and claws. We avoided such worlds." "Well, your people settled on one anyway," Susan said, checking her weapon. "And now we need to deal with it." Jack studied the colony's layout on a large display screen. "We need to strengthen the eastern perimeter immediately. That's where the pack seemed most interested." Frank worked at a terminal analyzing sensor data. "I'm picking up unusual energy patterns around the ruins where we found Kral. There's something about that place that attracts them." As the humans worked quickly to secure the colony, Kral sat with his father and other young Kalarians describing what had happened. The children listened with wide eyes as he told them about the predator and how the humans had saved him. "They didn't try to escape," Kral explained. "They moved toward the danger. Jack put himself between me and the creature." "Humans evolved differently than we did," Jen told the gathered children. "Their world shaped them to face threats rather than avoid them." Later that evening, as the colony's night cycle began, Jack found Kral sitting alone looking out at the jungle through a reinforced viewport. "How are you feeling?" Jack asked, sitting beside the young Kalarian. "I understand now," Kral said simply. "Why your people are always preparing, always watching. You know what it's like to be hunted." Jack nodded. On Earth, humans were both predator and prey for much of our evolution. It shaped how we think, how we react to danger. "Can you teach me?" Kral asked. "I don't want to be afraid like that again." Before Jack could answer, an alarm sounded throughout the colony. Susan's voice came over the communication system. "All personnel to emergency stations. We have multiple contacts approaching the eastern perimeter." Jack stood quickly. "Stay inside with the others," he told Kral. "We've prepared for this." From the viewport, Kral watched as Jack and the other humans gathered weapons and equipment, moving with purpose rather than panic. The Kalarians huddled together, their natural instinct to hide taking over. But Kral found himself wondering what it would be like to stand and face danger instead. Outside, in the growing darkness, yellow eyes gleamed among the trees. The shadow hunters had returned in greater numbers, testing the colony's defenses, searching for weakness. They had found easy prey in the Kalarian boy earlier, and now they wanted more. Susan organized the human security team along the eastern wall. "They're more active at night," she observed, "probably using those extra eyes for low-light hunting." Jack joined her, carrying sensor equipment. The ruins Kral found might be their den or territory marker. "We need to understand them better if we're going to coexist on this planet." As the night deepened, the standoff continued. The predators prowled just beyond the perimeter lights, occasionally testing the barriers but retreating from the humans' warnings. Inside, Kral watched and learned, seeing for the first time what it meant to stand ground instead of flee. "Tomorrow," he decided quietly to himself, "I will ask Jack to teach me how humans face their fears." Morning came to Viridian 6 with an uneasy quiet. The predators had withdrawn before dawn, but everyone in the colony knew they would return. Susan had kept security teams on rotation all night, and now they looked tired but alert as Jack joined them at the eastern perimeter. "Any changes?" Jack asked, handing Susan a steaming cup of coffee. She took it gratefully. They tested the barriers twice more around midnight. Smart creatures, they went for the sensor blind spots. Frank approached with a data tablet. "We've got another problem," he said. "The weather satellites are showing a magnetic storm forming. Over the eastern continent, it'll hit us by this afternoon." Jack frowned. "How bad?" "Bad enough to disrupt our communications and possibly the perimeter defenses," Frank replied. "And Alan says the storm will ground all aircraft." Alan Peters, the colony's pilot, joined their conversation. "We can't evacuate anyone until it passes. The magnetic interference would fry any ship's navigation systems." Susan's expression darkened. "So we're on our own with limited defenses and predators circling." Inside the main colony building, Kral sat with his cousin Mira in the science lab. The older Kalarian was studying tissue samples from plants near the ruins. "These show unusual properties," Mira explained. "The cellular structure changes in response to electromagnetic fields." Kral watched her work, still thinking about the predators. "Do you think the creatures might be affected by the magnetic storm too?" Mira paused, her large eyes blinking thoughtfully. "That's a good question. Perhaps we should ask Jack. He understands predator behavior better than we do." They found Jack in the control room with Susan, Frank, and Alan. The humans were gathered around a holographic display of the colony and surrounding area. "The storm will hit here first," Frank was saying, pointing to the eastern section where the jungle was thickest. "Then sweep across the colony for approximately 3 hours. Jack noticed the 2 Kalarians entering. "Kral, Mira, you should be with the others in the shelter area." "We had a question about the predators," Kral said, stepping forward with more confidence than he felt. "Could they use the magnetic storm somehow?" The humans exchanged glances. "What makes you ask that?" Jack said. Mira explained about the plant samples and their reaction to electromagnetic fields. "If the local plant life evolved to respond to these regular magnetic disturbances, perhaps the animal life did too." Jack's eyes widened. The tracks we found were all near areas with high mineral content, areas that would amplify electromagnetic fields. And the ruins where Kral was attacked, Susan added. Frank, didn't you say there were unusual energy readings there? Frank nodded quickly, typing commands into his tablet. The stones contain high concentrations of magnetite. During a storm, they'd create a distinctive electromagnetic signature. A hunting ground, Jack said grimly. The predators might use the magnetic disturbances to disorient their prey. A loud alarm suddenly blared throughout the colony. Red emergency lights began flashing. The storm's arriving earlier than predicted. Frank shouted over the noise. The Yar colony's lights flickered, then stabilized as backup systems engaged. From outside came a new sound, low, rumbling growls that seemed to come from all directions. Everyone to emergency positions, Susan ordered, through the colony-wide communication system. This is not a drill. Jack turned to Kral and Mira. Get to the central shelter now. Stay with your people. As the Kalarians hurried away, Kral looked back to see the humans moving with quick, efficient motions, checking weapons, distributing equipment, coordinating through their communication devices. None of them showed fear, only focus. In the ear, central shelter, Jen was organizing the Kalarians. The large room was filled with worried blue faces, some showing flickering patterns of distress on their skin. The humans will protect us, Jen assured them, though his own voice wavered slightly. Kral found himself saying, "We should help them." The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at the young Kalarian. "What could we do?" someone asked. "We are not fighters." Kral thought about what he had seen of the humans. "We don't need to fight like they do, but we can think. We can plan." Mira stepped forward. "Kral's right. The predators use electromagnetic senses for hunting. Our skin can generate bioluminescence. Perhaps we can use that." Vex, the elder, nodded, slowly. In ancient times, when our ancestors faced ocean predators, they would create synchronized light patterns to confuse attackers. Outside, the storm grew stronger. The sky darkened to a deep purple as lightning flashed between heavy clouds. Wind whipped through the colony, carrying strange scents from the jungle. Jack and Susan positioned their teams at key points around the perimeter. The barriers were holding, but the magnetic interference was causing the sensors to give false readings. "They're using the storm," Jack said as they watched dark shapes moving through the trees. Just like Kral suggested. The first attack came from the east, where the ruins stood. 3 of the predators charged the barrier together, their powerful bodies slamming against the energy field. The barrier flickered but held. "They're testing for weaknesses," Susan called out. "Watch all sectors." More predators appeared, circling the colony. The humans fired warning shots, but the creatures seemed less intimidated than before. Suddenly, the main power grid failed. The barriers weakened, their blue glow dimming dangerously. "Back up power to the barriers," Susan ordered. "Everyone fall. Back to defensive position 2. As the humans regrouped, a section of the eastern barrier failed completely. 2 predators immediately charged through the gap, heading for the main colony building. Inside the shelter, the Kalarians felt the building shake. Emergency lights cast a red glow over their frightened faces. "They're inside the perimeter," someone cried. Instead of panic, Kral felt a strange calm. "Mira, what if we use our bioluminescence like Vex suggested? Could we create a pattern that might confuse their hunting senses?" Mira's eyes widened. If the magnetic storm is enhancing their senses, then a strong enough light pattern might overwhelm them. Jen looked uncertain. "Our light response is instinctive, triggered by fear or joy. We cannot simply activate it at will." "Humans can control their instincts," Kral said firmly. "Maybe we can learn to control ours too." Outside, Jack and 3 security team members faced off against the predators that had breached the perimeter. The creatures moved with frightening speed, their armored hides deflecting glancing shots. "Aim for the eyes," Jack shouted as one predator lunged toward him. He rolled away just in time, feeling the rush of air as powerful jaws snapped shut inches from his leg. Susan and her team were trying to fix the barrier, but the storm's interference made progress difficult. "We need 10 more minutes," she called to Jack. "We may not have 10 minutes," he replied, backing toward the main building entrance. The door behind him suddenly opened. Jack expected to see frightened Calarians seeking escape. Instead, Kral, Mira, and several others emerged, their skin glowing with bright, pulsing patterns of blue and green light. "Jack, get your people behind us," Kral called out. The Calarians formed a line, their bioluminescence growing stronger, patterns synchronizing into waves that moved across their bodies. The predators paused, their six-eyed heads turning in confusion. The electromagnetic signals they used for hunting were being overwhelmed by the pulsing lights. Jack quickly moved his team behind the Calarians. "Whatever you're doing, keep it up." The predators backed away, shaking their heads as if trying to clear their vision. The Calarians advanced slowly, their light display growing more intense. For the first time, Jack saw the predators retreat in genuine confusion rather than tactical withdrawal. The creatures slipped back through the damaged barrier section, returning to the jungle's edge. "Susan now," Jack called into his communicator. The barrier flickered back to life, sealing the breach. The predators prowled beyond it, no longer attempting to attack but not leaving either. As the storm continued to rage overhead, humans and Calarians stood together at the barrier's edge, neither predator nor prey, but something new: allies. The magnetic storm continued through the night, battering the colony with strange energy pulses that made equipment malfunction and skin tingle. By morning, everyone was tired but grateful to be alive. The predators had remained outside the repaired barrier, watching and waiting. Jack stood with Susan at the control center, reviewing damage reports. "Eastern section took the worst hit," Susan said, pointing to red areas on the display. "Living quarters are intact, but the research labs are compromised." "Any casualties?" Jack asked. "Minor injuries only," Susan replied. "Doug Martinez got clawed trying to repair the barrier, but Lisa says he'll recover fully." Doug, a stocky combat engineer with dark hair, sat nearby with his arm bandaged. Despite his injury, he was already drawing designs for improved barriers on his tablet. "These creatures are smart," Doug said when Jack approached. "They targeted the power relays specifically. We need to rethink our defenses." Outside, Kral and Mira walked with Jen and Lyra, Kral's mother, inspecting the damage to the eastern section. Lyra, the colony's medic, carried scanning equipment to check for radiation from the storm. "The predators left clear marks," Mira noted, pointing to deep scratches on the outer wall. "They were testing different sections." "Looking for weaknesses," Kral added, remembering how the humans had explained predator behavior. Lyra studied her son with concern. Since the attack, Kral seemed different, more alert, more like the humans in some ways. "You did well yesterday," she said softly. "Using our light response that way was clever." "It was Kral's idea," Mira said proudly. "He's learning to think like both Calarian and human." Jen looked troubled by this observation but said nothing. The colony spent the day repairing damage and strengthening defenses. The humans worked tirelessly, showing a stamina that impressed the Calarians. Doug created makeshift weapons from colony equipment, teaching willing Calarians how to use them. "You don't need to be strong," he explained to a group that included Kral. "You just need to be smart about using leverage and timing." By afternoon, Frank had restored most of the sensor network. "I've modified them to track electromagnetic disturbances," he told Jack and Susan. "If the predators are using the magnetic fields to hunt, we might be able to predict their movements." In the medical bay, Lisa treated the injured while studying blood samples from both species. "The storm affected Calarian biochemistry," she explained to Lyra. "Their bioluminescent response is stronger now, almost as if the storm activated dormant cellular pathways. Our ancestors evolved in oceans with regular electromagnetic storms," Lyra confirmed. "But we lost many of those adaptations when we became a spacefaring species." As evening approached, Alan reported from the observation tower. "Storm's finally passing, but I'm picking up unusual movement in the jungle." The predators are gathering again, more than before. Jack joined him, using binoculars to scan the tree line. They're organizing, he said grimly. I count at least 12 distinct individuals. There's something else, Alan added. They seem to be following one particular predator, larger than the others, with distinctive scarring along its left side. Jack studied the creature Alan pointed out. It was massive, nearly twice the size of the others, with a pattern of old wounds that suggested it had survived many battles. A pack leader, Jack muttered. That complicates things. In the control center, Kral found Mira working with Frank to analyze data from the ruins. We found something interesting, Mira told him excitedly. The ruins aren't just random stones, they're arranged in a pattern that amplifies electromagnetic fields. Like an antenna? Kral asked, remembering human technology terms. Exactly, Frank confirmed. And during the storm they generated a specific frequency that matches brainwave patterns we detected from the predators. They used the ruins as a meeting place, Kral realized. Or maybe a hunting ground. The colony alert sounded again, but this time it wasn't for an attack. Susan called all leaders to the main hall for an emergency meeting. Humans and Calarians gathered quickly, faces serious. The predators are changing tactics, Susan began without preamble. They're no longer testing random sections of our perimeter. They're focusing on the east side where the labs are located. Where the children's quarters are also located, Jen added, his voice tight with worry. Jack stepped forward. We need to evacuate everyone from the eastern section until we can properly secure it. The storm damaged too many systems there. Where will we move them? Lyra asked. The central areas are already crowded. We'll convert the storage areas in the western section, Doug suggested. It won't be comfortable, but it'll be safer. As they discussed logistics, a loud crash came from the direction of the eastern labs. Warning alarms blared throughout the colony. They're early, Susan shouted, already running toward the sound with Jack and Doug close behind. The scene in the eastern section was chaos. Part of the ceiling had collapsed, creating a breach in the colony's structure. 3 predators had already entered and were moving through the damaged labs, hunting. Get the children out now, Jack ordered as he helped Susan set up a defensive position. Kral and Mira were already helping to evacuate the younger Calarians. This way, Kral called, leading a group of frightened children toward the central section, but the route was cut off as another section of ceiling crashed down, blocking the main corridor. Kral, Mira, and 6 young Calarians were trapped in a small research area, with predators approaching from 2 directions. In here, Mira said, pulling the children into a storage room with reinforced doors. She sealed the entrance just as a predator's heavy body slammed against it. Outside, Jack and Susan fought to reach the trapped Calarians. Doug had brought makeshift weapons, electrified spears created from research equipment that could penetrate the predator's tough hide. We need to draw them away from the children, Jack shouted over the noise of alarms and growling predators. Susan nodded grimly. I'll take left. You go right. Inside the storage room, the young Calarians huddled together, their skin flickering with fear. The door shuddered as predators repeatedly rammed it. It won't hold much longer, Mira whispered to Kral. We need to do something. Kral looked around the storage room, his mind racing like he'd seen the humans do during crises. The room contained research equipment, chemical samples, and biological specimens. Remember what we did during the storm? Kral told the frightened children. We can use our light response together. Mira understood immediately. Everyone, stand in a circle. Think about the brightest, happiest moment of your life. Let your light response grow as strong as possible. The young Calarians followed their instructions, their blue skin beginning to glow with patterns of light. Now we need something to amplify it, Kral said, scanning the shelves. He found containers of bioluminescent algae samples that the scientists had been studying. These will help. As the door began to buckle under the predator's assault, Kral and Mira quickly distributed the algae containers around the room. The predators broke through just as they finished, the largest one entering first, the scarred pack leader Alan had spotted earlier. The massive predator fixed its 6 eyes on Kral, recognizing the young Calarian from their first encounter at the ruins. It moved forward purposefully, ignoring the others, jaws opening wide. "Now!" Kral shouted. The Calarians released their most powerful light response, synchronized into pulsing patterns. The algae samples, reactive to their bioluminescence, amplified the effect dramatically. The storage room erupted in blinding, pulsating light. The pack leader staggered, disoriented by the overwhelming electromagnetic signals. But its determination was stronger than the others. It continued advancing toward Kral, fighting through the confusion. Outside, Jack heard the children's cries. He fought past 2 smaller predators, using Doug's electric spear with surprising skill. Susan was right behind him, covering his advance. "They're in the storage room," Jack called to her. "I'm going in." As he reached the broken doorway, Jack saw a scene that would stay with him forever. The young Calarians bravely standing their ground in a circle of light, while the massive scarred predator loomed over Kral, its jaws opening wide enough to swallow the boy whole. Time seemed to slow as the massive predator lunged at Kral. The young Calarian stood his ground despite his fear, his blue skin glowing brightly. The scarred pack leader, half blinded by the pulsing lights but driven by hunger and rage, snapped, its powerful jaws around Kral's shoulder. Kral cried out in pain as teeth pierced his skin. The other young Calarians screamed, their light patterns faltering in terror. "Hold the light," Mira shouted, trying to maintain the defensive pattern even. As her cousin was caught in the predator's grip, Jack burst through the doorway, electric spear in hand. He took in the scene in an instant, the circle of frightened Calarian children, the brilliant bioluminescent display, and Kral caught in the jaws of the largest predator he had ever seen. Without hesitation, Jack charged forward. "Let him go!" he roared. The predator's head whipped around, Kral still caught in its teeth. 6 yellow eyes focused on this new threat, narrowing with recognition. This was the human who had interfered with its hunt before. Jack didn't slow down. He ducked, low as the predator swung its massive head toward him, sliding beneath its armored belly. With one powerful thrust, he drove the electric spear upward into the soft spot where leg met torso. The predator shrieked, a high-pitched sound that hurt everyone's ears. Its jaws opened reflexively, releasing Kral, who fell to the floor. Mira darted forward to drag her injured cousin back to safety. But the pack leader wasn't defeated. It rounded on Jack with frightening speed, slashing with clawed feet. Jack rolled away, but not fast enough. Sharp claws tore through his jacket and into his side. "Jack!" Kral cried out, trying to stand despite his bleeding shoulder. The storage room door slammed open again as Susan arrived with Doug and 2 other security team members. They surrounded the predator, attacking from all sides with electric spears and shock weapons. "Everyone out now," Susan ordered the Calarians. The predator fought with incredible strength, throwing Doug against a wall and snapping one of the electric spears in half. Yet it was outnumbered, and the continuing light display from the Calarians confused its senses. Jack, despite his wound, got back to his feet. He remembered something from Earth's history, how early humans had hunted larger, stronger animals, by working together, by thinking ahead instead of just reacting. "The eyes!" he shouted to Susan. "Target the eyes!" Susan understood immediately. She feinted to the left, drawing the predator's attention, then thrust her weapon directly at its central pair of eyes. The creature jerked back, roaring in pain and fury. This gave Jack the opening he needed. He grabbed a container of the bioluminescent algae and rushed forward, smashing it directly into the predator's face. The bright blue substance covered its remaining eyes and sensitive nasal openings. Blinded and disoriented, the predator thrashed wildly. Jack called to the others, "Get back! Everyone out now!" As they retreated, Jack grabbed Kral, who couldn't walk on his own. The human lifted the Calarian boy easily, despite his own injuries, and carried him from the storage room. Doug sealed the door behind them, trapping the pack leader inside. "That won't hold it for long," he warned. "It doesn't need to," Jack replied. "We just need enough time to reach the central section." They moved quickly through the damaged corridors, Jack carrying Kral while Susan and Doug protected their retreat. Behind them, They could hear the predator smashing against the storage room door. Other growls echoed through the eastern section. More predators had entered the colony. In the central section, Lisa and Lyra had set up an emergency medical area. When Jack arrived with the injured Kral, Lyra rushed forward with a cry of distress. "He'll be okay?" Jack assured her, laying Kral gently on a treatment bed. "The wounds aren't too deep." Lisa immediately began treating Kral while Lyra turned to Jack's injuries. "You saved my son again," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "He saved himself too," Jack replied, wincing as Lyra cleaned his wounds. He stood his ground, used his mind instead of just running. Across the room, Frank worked frantically at a control panel with Jen and Alan. "The eastern section is lost," Frank reported grimly. "Too many breaches, but I've sealed all access points to the central and western sections." "What about the other predators outside?" Susan asked, checking her weapons. "Still circling," Alan replied, "but they seem confused without their leader." Jack looked thoughtful despite the pain of his injuries. "They follow the scarred one. What if we use that?" For the next hour, as Lisa treated the injured, the others developed a plan. The pack leader was still trapped in the storage room, but it would break free eventually. The other predators continued to prowl around the colony, searching for ways to enter. "We can't kill them all," Jack explained to the gathered humans and Calarians, "and we shouldn't try. This is their world. They were here first. But we can't live with constant attacks either," Jen argued. "No, but we can establish boundaries," Jack said. "These creatures are intelligent. They can learn." Doug had modified their remaining weapons based on what they had learned about the predator's sensitivity to electromagnetic signals. These will generate targeted pulses that should be extremely unpleasant for them without causing permanent harm. Kral, his shoulder bandaged, spoke up from his bed. "Like training Earth animals to avoid certain areas?" Jack nodded. "Exactly. We need to show them that hunting us costs too much effort for too little reward." When the pack leader finally broke free, it found a clear path leading out of the colony, a path marked by Calarian bioluminescence patterns that triggered its hunting instincts. Wounded and angry, it followed the trail, leading the other predators with it. The trail led to the ruins where Kral had first encountered the creatures. There, Jack, Susan, and several volunteers waited with Doug's modified weapons. The Calarians stood behind them, ready with their synchronized light display. When the pack leader arrived with its followers, Jack stepped forward alone. The massive predator recognized him immediately, snarling with hatred and remembered pain. "This ends now," Jack said calmly. Not that the creature understood his words, but it understood his stance, his refusal to flee. The pack leader charged. Jack waited until the last moment, then activated Doug's device. A powerful electromagnetic pulse shot forward, hitting the predator with a frequency precisely calibrated to its neural patterns. The effect was immediate. The creature stopped as if it had hit a wall, shaking its head in distress. Behind it, the other predators backed away, sensing their leader's pain. Jack took a step forward. The pack leader growled but retreated a matching step. Again and again, Jack advanced while the predator withdrew, until they reached the edge of the ruins. There, Jack stopped. He lowered the weapon slightly, not putting it away, but no longer pointing it directly at the creature. For a long moment, human and predator stared at each other. Then slowly the pack leader turned away. It made a low rumbling sound to its followers, and the entire group melted into the jungle. Back at the colony, repairs began on the damaged sections. Humans and Calarians worked side by side, their different abilities complementing each other. Kral found Jack at the new perimeter fence looking out at the jungle. "Do you think they understand now?" the young Calarian asked. Jack smiled. "I think they're beginning to. And so are we." "Will they come back?" Kral asked. "Probably," Jack admitted. "But next time, we'll be ready. And maybe, over time, we can find a way to truly share this world." As they watched, a distant movement caught their attention. At the jungle's edge stood the scarred pack leader, its 6 eyes gleaming in the fading light. It made no move to approach, simply observing. Jack nodded slightly to the creature. After a moment, the predator turned and disappeared into the trees. Humans don't just fight predators on Earth, Jack told Krull. Sometimes we learn to respect them, to understand their place in the world. That's how we survived, not just with strength, but with wisdom. Krull looked at his bandaged shoulder, then at Jack's injured side. I think I'm starting to understand humans better now. And humans are starting to understand Calarians better, Jack replied. Maybe that's the real victory here. Together, they turned back toward the colony, where two different species were learning that their different paths of evolution each had something valuable to offer the other.